Eloise in Oxonia, a creative podcast by the Oxford Writers' House. Follow English student Eloise Weaver as she moves through the city of Oxford, encountering stories, past and present. Eloise's adventures are fantasy, but the authors, people and ideas she encounters are as real as you and I.
Hello again. I'm glad you came back. I woke up this morning feeling nervous and lonely, shaking like a branch, waiting for this chapter to start. I miss Mum, the sea, everything familiar. After the initiations, teas, term cards, brochures, merchandise distribution, reading lists and tutorial instructions, I am prepared, I think, for my first social outing. Our calendars are already full of events, or ENTs as they are called here. Dinners, orientations, readings and garden parties. This is another world. It moves faster and breathes thinner air. It feels decorative, trivial, elaborate and terrifying. I do not fit in at all, but I am trying. All of my clothes suddenly look shabby to me, but I don't have an allowance for anything better. Luckily, I have the commoner's gown for formal events to cover up. I have not seen the mysterious old woman again, but during breakfast I sat on the long wooden bench at an even longer table under severe portraits of distinguished men. I was sat next to Tessa, who told me the old woman is called Professor Mead. She tutors medieval literature. Tessa says she is an actual witch, as in a practicing Wiccan who performs spells and rituals. Tessa is my first friend, I think. She is unlike anyone I have ever met. I can't take everything she says at face value. Tessa is tall, with long hair and a sharp nose. She wears gold hoops in her ears and her clothes always look pressed and clean. I met her during our college family meeting. We are going on a kind of forced family outing to the Pitt Rivers Museum this afternoon. I hope it's not awkward. I'm always so awkward. This morning at breakfast, Tessa casually told me that her Christmas present for the family dog was a canine perfume called Kennel No. 5. I munched a croissant and thought, that can't be true, can it? Do real people buy perfumes for dogs? The only thing Tessa and I have in common is that we both like poetry and are reading English. She's interested in beat poetry and rap, whereas I prefer working through poems with difficult words and arcane images. I have a few hours to spare. Will you come with me to the Pitt Rivers? I am going with Amari Henrique, our college father. His partner Jax was supposed to come, but he made an excuse. I didn't see Jax directly. He floated past me on his way out the door. All I know about Jax is a heavy scent of jasmine, bay leaves and whiskey. He wears a velvet smoking jacket. Just the smell alone did my head in. I felt dizzy from it. Omari Henrique sighed when Jax said he couldn't come to the family outing. Jax made an excuse about Drama Society welcome drinks. Omari said, single parenting can be so difficult. Jax is a big deal, Tessa says. Quincy is coming along. He's an apex predator with perfect teeth and clear blue eyes. He likes cryptocurrency and mathematics. A visiting student from France is also part of the college family. I think her name changes from day to day. She has pink hair and a wicked smile. When I met her, she said, today my name is Iris. I'm not always the same. She winked at me. She smokes rolly cigarettes and whistles instead of exhaling. Her accent is like hot chocolate. We made our way together through the fields of the university parks, crossing the meadowlands, passing the Tolkien bench. It is a simple wooden bench with an almost indecipherable placard. Late summer light dances overhead through the trees, dappling the thirsty grass at our feet. Iris puffs on her cigarette like a steam train. Tessa checks her cuticles and comments, Tolkien was at Merton. All the nerds are always at Merton. Omari grimaces. Yes, that's correct, he says in a casual way. And just as a side note, Tolkien's favourite food was mushrooms from a field. He liked foraging. Good on him. There is an awkward silence. Birds sing in the treetops. We walk through university parks, a long, sloping area of cricket pitches, puddles, squirrels and the occasional ice cream truck. I want to run in the field like a child. Quincy sighs. Ugh, this heat is horrible. Look what it's doing to my loafers. I try walking closer to Iris. I ask her what she's signed up for. She puffs on her cigarette and squints at me. Geocaching and calligraphy, she says, whistling softly. You? Poetry Society, I return. Lovely, she says in her chocolate voice. Tessa interrupts. I absolutely adore poetry. We have that in common, don't we, Eloise? The park gates yawn in front of us. Then we turn a corner and arrive at the museum. The windows of the museum and stone columns are blooming with ornate carvings. Cats, monkeys, botanical fronds, strawberry plants, birds, insects, all frozen in stone. Inside there are imposing statues of scientists. Bacon, Galileo, Newton and Darwin. The scientists are preserved in time, mid-debate. They hold instruments of study or persuasion. Darwin's theory of evolution was debated here. The museum is like a huge gutted specimen, with high-vaulted ironworks and a ceiling made of iron and glass. Walking through the belly of the museum, we pass stuffed creatures and dinosaur skeletons, meeting John Holmes, who introduces himself as an honorary associate of the museum and offers to introduce us to the building. He explains that
it was not until December 1853 that the university finally committed to buying a plot of land for the museum at the southern end of the university parks. The following April, the architectural competition for the building was launched. Once the university had decided to build its new museum, a key question alongside practicalities was, what should it look like? The 1840s and 1850s were the height of the so-called Battle of the Styles, with advocates of classical and Gothic at each other's throats over which was the nobler form of architecture. It was the diocesan architect for Oxford, George Edmund Street, who first proposed that the museum should be built in a Gothic style, for two main reasons. Firstly, Gothic architecture had always been decorated with carvings of plants and animals, so this was a fitting style for a museum which wanted to teach natural history, not just through its collections, but through art. Secondly, while classical architecture went back to pagan Greece and Rome, Gothic had always been a Christian style associated with cathedrals, churches and abbeys. Both these principles of Gothic architecture can be seen at work in the decorative sculpture on the museum's facade. Charles Daubeny, Professor of Chemistry and Botany at Oxford, imagined the central court of the museum as the sanctuary of the Temple of Science. With its Gothic vaulting and glass ceiling, its celebration of natural forms and materials, and its pantheon of scientists doing science, it is exactly that. It is also part of a decorative schema designed to turn the building itself into an object lesson in natural science. Henry Ackland, at the time Lee's Reader in Anatomy at Christ Church, explained the logic of this schema to the Oxford Architectural Society in June 1855, a few days before the foundation stone was laid. Oxford, he said, was about to perform an experiment. It was about to try how Gothic art could deal with those railway materials, iron and glass. And he was convinced when the interior court of this museum was seen, with its roof of glass, supported by shafts of iron, while the pillars and columns around were composed of variously coloured marbles illustrating different geological strata and ages of the world, and the capitals represented the several descriptions of floras, that it would be felt that problems had been solved of the greatest importance to architecture. So the roof would show what engineering could achieve by combining the structural ingenuity of the Gothic arch with modern materials. The columns would teach geology through their materials and botany through their carving. And the whole exercise was to be an experiment designed to solve problems in imitation of the scientific method itself.
As we walk around the museum, he points out the colourful stone columns which stretch up to the ceiling all around us, explaining the place in the schema, saying that
Ackland explained to the Oxford Architectural Society how the museum's columns would teach geology and botany, but it was his colleague John Phillips who put this into practice. Phillips was a career geologist who had cut his teeth working with his uncle William Smith, the creator of the first geological map of England and Wales. Phillips had been director of the Yorkshire Museum, taught at universities in London and Dublin, and worked for the Geological Survey. In 1853 he joined Oxford University as the Deputy Reader in Geology, before being appointed as the first keeper of the new Oxford University Museum. Phillips mapped out which types of rock and plant were to be shown where on the colonnade, which runs round the central court. The columns themselves were made of polished limestone marbles, each a sample of a different rock. Together they form an encyclopedia of the geology of the British Isles. They are still used to this day by lecturers at Oxford to teach their students about the composition and formation of rocks from different geological epochs, while the variations in the colours, patterns, textures, even the temperatures of the columns, create a unique and beautiful aesthetic experience. To accompany his geological encyclopedia, Phillips planned out a botanical equivalent, this time covering not just Britain and Ireland, but the whole world. Oxford University's Botanic Gardens are on a different site from the museum, so to complement the museum's zoological collections, the capitals of the columns were carved with plants showing their characteristic forms, the stages of their growth, and even the animals that might live among them.
He points behind us, saying,
The east wall of the museum was left blank for a prospective extension. An opportunity for this came along in the 1880s when General Augustus Pitt Rivers gave his anthropological collection to the university, so that became in effect the anthropology department, as well as the Pitt Rivers Museum.
Walking in the direction he pointed out, we come to the cavernous room beyond, the Pitt Rivers Museum, a world inside a world. Our eyes adjust to the gloomy darkness. We are given torches to explore cabinets full of items pilfered from every corner of the planet. Voodoo dolls, a magician's taxidermy frogs, primitive tools for writing, lacework, boat building, and ritualistic murder. It feels like some dark secret from the past is frittering in every corner. One tall glass cabinet calls to me. Inside is a collection of shrunken human heads. Tessa remembers a poem she read over the summer about these heads. The poet, she tells us, was Francis Leviston.
In the cargo hold, cruising at 30,000 feet above blue islands, galactically cold, I float between Oxford and the site where I was found, then traded on. I cannot see for bubble wrap. At this stage in my repatriation, I belong to no one, a blip, a birdie ounce in the undercarriage. Only the curator knows I've gone and who is left. She redesigns the tour. Lizard bones replace me, indigenous crafts distract with dyed feathers from an absence. So, in me, no memory withstood the leather-thonged, moth-kissed costume of an Eskimo, its upright hood ringed with reindeer fur like frost, regarding me for years without a face across the Victorian cabinets. Or a cruel long spear frozen in space, dressed like a wrist with jade and jet. Or Bobo, as I named him, his heavy puss pursed like a clown's, like a freshly sprung mushroom, observing silence. I miss being part of the known quantifiable index, the massive mouths of children smearing the glass case, sometimes shocked and crying, more often delighted to learn of my fate. Sneaking pictures for school reports. Their flashes filled me up with light, like water would a calabash, or cauterizing beams from night security did the displays. For hours after, I'd see patterns that couldn't be real. Shadow plays, huge birds fighting each other up the loaded walls. I'd imagine hands to rub my eyelids with, lift them, and feel the cross-stitches holding me in, my vengeful breath trapped beneath their seals, wanting for the first time in lifetimes to exhale, to spit red berries or the prattle of a curse. Then that would fail in the force of my several injuries, and I'd seem to drop towards a far ocean, armless, footless, a seed head blown without will or hope or wishing upon through the middle of a crown, to land on my shelf, under rows of wooden masks and blown birds' eggs smelling the open jar of myself, salt sweet as tamarisk, mild as figs.
Alone, I would have taken the time to consider the reality of these objects, alienated from both the shoulders of their owners and the country of their origin. With my newfound companions, however, I am whisked past treasure after treasure, as Quincy and Tessa catalogue the floors of the Pitt Rivers with offhand efficiency. Quincy slows as he passes the towering Haida totem pole. His eyes pass over the artifact itself, landing on the details of its purchase. $36, 1901. He glances up at the pole, verifying this colonial appraisal. About $1 a foot? Not bad. Mr. Rivers knew how to close a deal. Tessa cannot help but snort at this earnestness. Oh, naturally, because you've closed so many deals yourself, Quincent. It's getting dark and the museum is almost empty now. Tessa comes up behind me and pinches my sides. Ready? She asks. Tonight's our first bop. Let's get dressed at mine. Bops are student events, a jokey name meaning badly organised parties, which are basically glorified school discos in fancy dress. They sound a bit odd, but I am excited to go with Tessa. Iris joins us and asks, "What's happening?" in her chocolate voice. "Nothing," Tessa says quickly. I wonder why Iris isn't invited to Tessa's room, and feel my stomach go a bit queasy. Social situations like this have always made me uncomfortable. Omari, in a crisp collared shirt and bright smile, meets our college family outside. "Well, that was lovely, wasn't it?" he says paternally. "I'll be going now. I'm sure Jack's also sends his regards from God knows what society gathering he's joined now. Enjoy your evening." He gives us each one kiss on the cheek, Italian style, turns curtly on his heels, and saunters off into the yellow evening. I admire his diplomacy and timing, and secretly wish I could get out of going to the bop too. Tessa has her manicured claws in me. I'll see you there, dear listener. I'll need you for moral support.
Episode 2 of Eloise in Oxonia was written by Dr. April Power, Griffin Goditis, Joy Chang and Tom Stopford. The episode features original readings by Esme Rhodes and Judith Bunting and is edited by Ursula White. Francis Leverston reads A Shrunken Head, and Professor John Holmes describes the Natural History Museum. Visitors to Oxford, please note that the shrunken heads are not currently on display. Special thanks goes to the National Poetry Archive for their expert support.